Joined now by CBS News foreign policy and national security contributor H.R. McMaster. He's also former national security advisor, one of many in the first term of President Trump's presidency. H.R., always good to see you. So I think if this memorandum of an understanding could be summarized as a song, the title might be, "Is That All There Is?"
Yeah, Major, I agree. I think we'll have to see how it's implemented. But from my perspective, it really cuts very significantly against U.S. interests, the interests of the Gulf states, and the interests of Israel. And I think the biggest problems with it are right in that first, number one of the 14 of including Lebanon. I mean, why the heck should Iran have any say about what happens in Lebanon? And of course, this is all meant to protect Hezbollah, an organization that has terrorized, that has terrorized Israel and has destroyed that country. And actually, the government in Lebanon has taken a courageous stand, saying, "Hey, this isn't our war against Israel. We want to disarm Hezbollah." So it gives Hezbollah a shot in the arm. But the biggest thing to watch, I think, Major, is going to be how the cash flows into Iran. The Iranian regime was on the mat financially. They're about to not be able to not make payroll. The economy was in a shambles. They were severely weakened, consistent, with one of the key objectives going into this fight, which was to prevent Iran from being able to project power outside of its borders. If they use that money, as we know that they have in the past, to reconstitute their missile drone strike complex and to flow money into their terrorist proxies across the region, then what the heck has this been for? So I really am concerned about the money. The vice president has said, "Hey, it's not going to be U.S. money released until they see progress." But as you've already mentioned in your reporting, just resuming the oil exports and then unfreezing Iranian assets, I think would be a huge and undeserved payout to a regime that has remained, in my view, permanently hostile to the great Satan, the United States, Israel, who they call the cancerous boil, their Arab neighbors. You have to remember, I mean, they fired almost 3,000 drones and missiles just at the UAE. So hey, I think this could be really an outcome that cuts against U.S. interests in many ways.
So let's talk about the money in sequence. So when oil begins to be sold, as it will be with a straight reopening, which it clearly is, that's money that will go to Iran. The second stage is lifting of sanctions. That's 2. 3 could be the unfreezing rather of Iranian assets. That would be 3. 4 would be this $300 billion reconstruction fund. And the administration says it's not U.S. taxpayer dollars. Do you think the Iranians care about that? It's $300 billion coming from Gulf nations who are trying to get back in good graces with the Iranian regime that has now survived the strongest military assault it's ever gotten from Israel and America combined. That's the 4 stages. And it's all money.
Yeah, and it has the ring of kind of capitulation. What also happens here is that other countries will not adhere to U.S. sanctions, and I think what you're already seeing is some of the Gulf states slide in some money under the table to Iran, because once they look kind of behind them, hey, who's got my back? After this massive onslaught against 14 different countries, Major, and they say, well, the U.S. doesn't have my back. Then they go back to kind of a hedging strategy, with the Iranians, and trying to buy them off or to to give them some financial benefit, ransom essentially. So what you have is, if they retain kind of the missile drone capability and the regime remains permanently hostile to their neighbors, to the U.S., to Israel, they retain coercive power over the global economy, and they hang this kind of sword of Damocles over the Gulf states' economic models. And so this empowers them. It empowers a regime that is a theocratic dictatorship hostile to humanity, I would say.
Let me ask you this before I let you go, because you were in the conversations in the first Trump administration. And when this conflict began on February 28th, the United States and Israel were very tightly aligned. And now that does appear to be under some stress. So much so that the vice president, J.D. Vance, told the New York Times in its podcast, talking about Israel, and I quote him here, "You're a country of 9 million people. You can't just kill your way out of solving every single national security problem that you have. That's a pretty harsh statement. And it suggests a kind of divergence between the administration and Israel, which, if you'd asked the Iranians when this war began, do you think at the end of it, or near the end of it, America and Israel will be more divided than when they started? Iran would say probably not, but that'd be really great.
Well, I think the president was on the precipice of just a tremendous achievement by weakening the Iranian regime, by demonstrating to the Gulf states that the only true guarantor of their security was the United States. And Israel and the United States working together had profoundly weakened not only the regime in Iran and degraded its ability to project power outside of its borders, but its terrorist proxies as well. Now, that statement by the vice president, I think, is insensitive based on remembering what happened on October 7th. It was during the Biden administration that Iran was able to kind of unimpeded, reinforce the ring of fire around Israel, right? Building up the rockets that Hezbollah had, for example, to 150,000, preparing Hamas for that onslaught, supporting, a proxy army in Syria, supporting the Houthis and so forth. And then they lit that ring of fire on October 7, 2023, and Israel found itself in a six-front war. Also, to say that Israel can't continue operations in Lebanon, it makes no sense. I mean, look at the rockets and that Hezbollah is firing into Israel. Can you imagine if a terrorist organization, maybe cartels in Mexico, were firing rockets and missiles into southern Texas and forcing us to evacuate towns there and cities there? That would we just be restrained? I don't think so. So I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of the enemy, Major. In 2017, when we brought options for Iran to President Trump, we had a fundamental assumption that there would not be peace in the region. There would not be peace between the U.S. and Iran until there was a fundamental change in the nature of that government. And I don't see evidence that that's happened.
H.R. McMaster, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Hey, great to be with you.